Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Growth Show. And before we kick off, thank you to all of you at home. 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're blown away, can't believe it. So happy you're getting some value from this little channel of ours. Today, we're going on a slightly different mission. Ollie's away traveling with work. So we are just going to do a bit of a catch up with some of the challenges we've faced this week. And from that will probably come a title of this video. So at the moment it's titleless, but let's sort of see where it goes. So David, how's your week been? What sort of interesting challenges have you been facing?
I've had a very good week, thank you, Nick. It's been good. Every week is always slightly different with clients and some of the challenges. You often see patterns with things. So I had two clients this week who've been speaking around kind of how they work out their kind of internal team dynamics, with new people joining the team, sort of trying to prove in their new role and how that can ruffle a few feathers around, or just teams coming together and how you kind of get past that storming stage of building a team. This is really interesting. And one of the stats that was pulled out this week and shown to me was that I think it was 93% of people would stay in jobs longer if their bosses showed empathy. And so many of the challenges that we're talking around teams just comes down to a lack of empathy. And I just think if the leaders there would just pause and just sit in someone else's shoes, most problems go away by showing a bit of empathy. So that's been one of the interesting things this week.
Nice. And what about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think empathy is absolutely critical tool. So I think the first thing to do is acknowledge the environment that we're operating with. I think there's two things, both of which come from Churchill. If you're going through hell, don't stop, and don't waste a good crisis. I think we're probably all observing little things, and David and I were just talking about this, that are becoming disproportionate, which is a sign of relationships getting stretched. Very much the answer to that, I think, is empathy. It's what holds people together when things get tough. It's that knowledge, it's that informal discussion that takes place, which all comes back to relationships and that intimacy. We use the word intimacy quite openly now in my team. So I think the other thing as well is acknowledging women. We talk about, I've had a few interactions with women this week, and they use some pretty bold words, which are quite emotional words, which I think men naturally sort of shy away from. So I think that's been another learning for me. I think the other thing is humour. So there's a great guy who spoke at the pub, a guy called Lars, who's setting up one of the biggest projects in the UK, and we called it. We've now termed it. We've created. He talks about being bold, and we've coined the term "going Lars." Which is a bit of humour, just to but that sort of creates some stiction. So I think that said as well, there's some major dislocations. So I think the unique thing about the current situation is it's not really an option just to tinker with a few things. Certainly as a turnaround specialist, I'm very much looking at the top level macro picture, as well as the medium, as well as the immediate term, and just checking this whole thing all the time to make sure the actions and the things I'm doing are aligned. But I think it's well worth acknowledging that the economy is really broken, and a lot of the tech actions are actually creating hell on earth, yet we still push it. And this indicator that somehow it's clever to get faster actually suggests that we're getting things wrong. So there's a real dislocation, and this is very much the land of the turnaround. So I think that's what I'd say in terms of the environment we're facing, Nick.
Right. So you've had another interesting week so far. I've might turn a bit of a therapy session. I've had a moment this week, which would be interesting to run past you, where we're working on a project, and I knew the answer to the project. I know where it's going. I can see the path we're going on, but I have to now take everyone on that journey to explain the path we're going on. And I found myself very, very impatient in that process, right? Which is a frustration. So I know I'm wasting time. I know I can get all the data together to evidence like this is the right path or the wrong path. but it's just frustrating to have to sort of go through that place. And I found myself getting annoyed, which I'm a pretty zen guy, but I actually found myself getting a little bit frustrated, and actually taking out my anger on other scenarios other than the one I had to deal with, which I imagine, David, is a thing you see often in your world.
Daily, I think. I think it'd be fair to say with them. And what's tricky is often in startups or fast-growing companies, you've got people at the top who really know their stuff. In any good business, you've got people who really know the market, really know their product, really know the business, whatever it is. And they tend to therefore be about 10 to 20 moves down the chessboard to everybody else. And this is a very, 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 very common problem with leaders in fast-growing teams, is that you get stuck between there, but we have to move fast, is the sort of mantra, which I'm sure Tom will pick up on later. So we have this, we have to move fast. So I need to do it. And then on the other side of that, but if you do it, then the staff don't get better, your team don't get better at what they're doing. And it actually creates a crutch for you, because then they keep coming back to you for all the answers. And it's incredibly disempowering. And I always say to people, I was like, well, would you prefer to take a little bit longer this time, or a lot longer every single time you then have to do this? Because everyone's they're gonna keep coming back to you because you've created this loop where they're just gonna come back and go, oh, Nick, I'm stuck again. What did I do here? Oh, right, okay, right. And then it just creates this sort of loop. So part of it is, well, I'll qualify that. Sometimes you just have to get on and do stuff. If there's a really tight deadline, sometimes you just have to pick the ball up and do it and then work it out later. But the majority of really good leaders that I've been around, they pace and lead their staff. And by pacing and leading, you know what the outcome is, and you've got to take people on that journey, with you to get to that outcome. So instead of saying, right, can you go and get this data? You might maybe scrub out the whiteboard behind you and go, right, what do we need to make this project really good? What kind of data do we need? Come on, check it out. Let's write it on the board. We need, and then you can kind of steer the conversation there and go, that's a brilliant idea. Right, let's get this data. What will that data do for us? And it's a far more empowering thing. It can feel like pulling teeth a bit, but it actually really helps people to do that. The other thing is if, let's say you just have to do it, you've got a really tight deadline and you have to just power through and get it done yourself. The first thing I do the day after that, I think it's a Clive Woodwardism, so it's probably quite good that Ollie isn't here, but he'd pick me up if it wasn't. We said, if you win a project, don't go out and celebrate, work out why you won it. If you lose a pitch, go out on the beers, have a beer, and then dust yourself off. So if you win a pitch, go and work out what you did to win it. And so something like that, once you've got it over the line, if you really had to power through to get it there, that's the point where you probably get everybody in the next day and go, guys, I'm really sorry. I was probably being a bit of a dictator getting everything done, but we had a really tight deadline and I knew that I had to do X, Y, Z to meet that deadline. Now, this is what, I want to get everyone to that point where we can all move at this speed. So let's break it down and let's look at how we got there. But either way, you're going to have to spend some time.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustration part I'm talking about. Is I consciously know at the pace I've gone, I've made the mistake, right? And then it's just a battle in my ego just to say, like, yeah, I'm just plowing ahead too fast on this, and I'm going to lose trust, right? If I just do this without evidencing the reasons why to the rest of the team, you're just setting yourself up to fail, right? Because they're not involved in the decision-making process.
Yeah, if you plow on at that speed, but if you just say, guys, look, I'm really sorry. This is, I made this gaffe. I'm really sorry. I dropped the ball on this, and that's on me. People think, strength and vulnerability. People think, well, it's two, it's diametrically opposed. It's actually the same, the same side of the same coins. In that, actually being vulnerable with a team can be a real strength, because they'll see it. They'll all talk about it later. Don't worry about that. They'll all know if you've made a mistake or not, or if somebody's made a mistake. And so just owning that and talking about it actually can really, it builds that trust back up very, very, very quickly, if it has indeed.
And I think that's the part that was a motive to me, was the fact I saw maybe the lack of data the guys would have as like a lack of trust in my decision making, right?
Yep.
And that's what I realized last night. That's the battle I'm having. It's actually, the guys trust me. They just want some, you know, really good evidence data before pushing on, which is sensible, right?
Yeah.
But I let my emotion believe, like, oh, you know, you're not trusting me. What's going on here? And it's and that for me is like the horrible bit where I go to bed at night just knowing like, oh, I failed today. That sucks.
Yeah, I think, Nick, this is what I was talking about before, and I think the good thing is you recognise this. Okay, the challenge is now what do you do? So I think I don't think it's got anything to do with data at all. I think it's got to do with your perspective of other people, and actually you need to flip that perspective to actually put them first. So your job is not to bang the drum. Your job is to create an environment. And I think there's two things. One is, and it depends a bit on who they are. So some people need clear and narrow objectives, and you'll know who those people are. And some people actually, you know, can operate within broad objectives. And then the challenge is to delegate that and for them to drive it themselves. And one of the warning signs in terms of stress, I think for me, is when I find myself doing that, because I can drive things so fast, it's just ridiculous. Till the wheels fall off. And I think I found myself in that situation. What's actually triggered that in me is actually this week is my daughter decided to report us to the COVID-19 police. So we all went into lockdown and I couldn't exercise. And that's part of my routine in terms of looking after myself. And I found I'd actually diarised that, and I was aware of this. And so I found myself in a similar situation. So I think the answer to speed, oddly enough, is to let people do their own jobs. And hyper speed is about, letting people do things at the right level of granularity, and then checking in to check the decision making, but with a caveat to say, look, if you get stuck, for goodness sake, tell me, but this is where we're going, and actually setting the timeline and actually handing it over. So if there is an imperative to do it all by tomorrow, that's fine, right? But for goodness sake, let them do it. But also to make sure you've got the right touch points. And I think a lot of these things, it's very much I know better, when in fact we really don't know better. We've really got to get out of that cycle. But I think the great thing is you've recognised that, that's when your actions have got to change. You've got to get back to basics, change your perspective to avoid doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been, for that 24-hour period, I was just a total hypocrite, right? Like, I championed an inclusive decision-making culture from the day of buying the business. And then I'm sort of pushing completely the opposite for one day, which is just silly.
Yeah.
Which is
on
just
that point, though, it's worth recognising actually, you can't always make decisions based on consultation. The reason for that is sometimes you've got difficult decisions when the winners and losers. So if there is something that's difficult going to be done, you can adopt a consult and decide approach as long as you make it clear that's what you're going to do. So you can consult with your team and you can say, look, this is what I'm planning to do. What do you think? And then you can call the shots. But as long as you make that clear, if you don't make that clear, then you can severely undermine the trust in the team, because you're breaking the norm of the team. And that's something I got wrong, seriously wrong, even though I was operating some very award-winning sites. So going back 2002, in fact, I changed the approach, but I didn't tell the team, and that was a highly consultative approach. So it's okay to change the decision making as long as you make it clear.
Yeah, and this was a hiring decision. This is one over a certain level. It's inclusive to the senior management team, and it was my rule. I mean, it was just a real. Considering I'm the person who usually says to people that we can take our. There's never too many things I find that have to be dealt with in that second, right? There's usually thinking time for every decision in a business like ours in particular. The rate we respond to clients is electric. I mean, that's sort of different. But actually, internal decisions, you can usually sleep on it, chew it over. But I just had a real. That was my red-faced moment of the week.
I think On that, I think there will be winners and losers on that, Nick, because when you're changing the dynamic of a team, you're changing the relationship. So there will be winners and losers, or perceived winners and losers. So don't underestimate that. When you're changing, one of the worst things you can ever do in a work environment is to sit in somebody else's seat. I don't know if you've ever done that. It's a very good way to sort of break up a culture and create a bit of energy. And so I think that probably is a situation which would have ended up in tears. So actually, I think there's an element of consultant to side approach there, because there's winners and losers. So I'm not surprised you might have had a bit of a dynamic with that one.
Yeah, and I think it's one a lot of leaders just fall into, again, the urgency piece, right? You're sort of like, let's get it done. It's, especially if you've done it long enough to be able to see how it plays out in the outcome. But actually, all the learning for the team around you is in what you have in your head of like why that outcome's probably going to play out that way. And that's the piece I missed out. That's the learning opportunity for the team. I missed out on there through just trying to get it off my to-do list and onto the next thing, which is bad. And David, I imagine you're just getting people to think fast and slow all the time, really, and just people put stuff in perspective.
Yeah. What is it? The average amount of time a business owner spends on their business is 3% of their time. Everyone's shocked by that stat. Everyone goes, yeah, no, I know I don't spend enough time, but yeah, maybe it is about that, because we get crammed with the day-to-day stuff. And so much of the day-to-day stuff is, when you get into the minutiae of it, it's people, because they haven't set people up to succeed in their own individual roles. That person then often becomes the bottleneck, because things have to be signed off through them, or they're in meetings about meetings. And you look at some people's diaries, and I always just go, right, highlight all the meetings, just, cluster them. So say it's recruitment meetings or strategy meetings or whatever, different highlighters, and then color code your week. And when you do that, it's amazing. You can see really clearly the colors of what's taking up time in your week. And then you go, right, and how much is that adding value to your business? I had one business owner who said, it was something to do with, it was a CEO, and he said 60% of his week was taken up with new hires. I was like, that is not the best use of your time. Everything from first interview, second interview, third interview, fourth interview through the process. I was like, you shouldn't be involved in all of those. That's just a hole you're pouring time into. And they were a smallish company, so they had 16, 17 employees at the time. So you can see why, and they care about it. They want to make sure the right cultural fit, all those things. But it just meant that 3 out of 5 days of his week were just sucked up with that, and not doing the actual thing of creating a business for these guys to actually then come in and work in. So it's really interesting. So I think a lot of the times people don't have enough time on their business, so they're then making reactive decisions in the moment. If you're really clear about what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, there's never any need to have a sort of reactive decision.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. So this person would sit on the first, second, and third round interviews.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. Okay.
But and again, it was from so with your recruiting hat on, you must go, wow, that is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard in my life, right? And I can see that by your reaction. But what it is they deeply cared about their business. So it's I often talk about the clients of upgrading the software. You can do that when you've got 3 or 4 people in your business. You're probably going to have to sit in every, most interview things, because who else is going to do it? There's 3 of you. But as the business grows, you need to upgrade your software so that you're upgrading as a leader in that business along with your business growing. Because otherwise we get stuck in these kind of old behaviors where suddenly someone goes, sorry, why do you order the coffee? Your CEO has 400 employees. Like, what's going on? Well, I've always done it. But no one's ever thought to stop and pause. And is it in the cold light today that people sort of go, oh yeah, wow, it's all boiled frog thing, isn't it? Is the temperature turns up in the pan, the frog often doesn't realise that the water then becomes boiling. And that's so often true for leaders. We're so in our own world of our business that someone externally comes in and goes, oh, have you thought about A, B, or C? And it's like, wow.
Yeah, that's a good point. Tom, question for you. When you've been hiring, are you at the end of the process or at the start of the process?
I'm normally 6 months ahead of the process, thinking about how to replace a chunk of the business. So
right.
So yeah, I think I'm absolutely passionate about hiring. I think I think the challenge with it is to look far enough forwards to make sure when you get the person on board, they're the right person and the organisation is actually fit for the job at that moment in time. And I think that's also taking place when it comes to finding new suppliers as well. Certainly in some of the larger, sort of US-based roles I was operating in or have been operating in, very much planning to replace chunks of the business in sort of 6 to 12 months. And I think that's becoming increasingly important. In terms of some of the points you made, I think, in those difficult situations, I think, Nick, when you find yourself in that sort of tailspin, it's good to reflect on our basic purpose. So specifically for me, one of the things I've learned from the pub is around profit and relationships. So if I'm taking action, do I check my actions? What am I doing? How does that affect profit? And how does that affect relationships? So when you've got yourself in that mess, that point in time or that state of thinking, I think that's important thing just to go back to something very simple. I think the other thing is it is important to be bold. This is a time to step out and take imperfect action. And actually, who is the judge of imperfect action? I think it's very easy to think we know better, and we simply don't. I think the other thing is not so much around wasting time. It's actually having the skills to cope with this particular situation. So I think professional development is absolutely critical, because I simply don't think that we've got the skills to operate in this environment. We think it's big and clever to go faster and faster. We can't cope with it, Nick. So I think some of the things you're talking about, and I include myself in this, that are actually triggers where we're beginning not to cope, and we need to recognise that. I think one of the things practically is, from my experience, particularly this week, people have run about 3 winning thinking programs this week, is that it's about having a jazz band around us. So you mentioned, David, around listening to customers. So the critical thing in those situations, is we switch off, Nick. When we're in that mode, we switch off, we stop listening to customers, and we just sort of get wrapped up in our own world. And I think that we have to have a healthy jazz band around us, and we have to have healthy relationships. Otherwise, we stop listening. And I think in terms of time management, the generalizations are the killers, which you guys are pretty familiar with now. Because that's actually what creates the stasis and or detracts, takes the eye off the ball. So the way we communicate with people is absolutely critical. And I've noticed, I've done the analysis, if leaders want to free up, get from 40% to 74%, and I'm talking literally 70% wasted time, stop making generalizations, because not only does it paralyze yourself, it paralyzes and confuses your whole team. So when I look at what's going on, I find that people are just doing their own thing. So you might think you're calling the shots, but if you get your engagement wrong with your people, they just do their own thing, Nick. They don't do it. That no one ever does what they're told. So beware. And I think in its simplest form, just letting go. We've got to find the courage to let go. It does require a lot of courage. We need to be in a good place to do that, because we need to be courageous to do that. So I think if we're not right in ourselves, it's less likely. So those things are all triggers that say, look, hold on a minute, I need to just check my perspective. And I think putting other people first always is critical, and that doesn't slow things down. It actually speeds things up. And hyper successful is around having that jazz band around us and letting people and have really close, intimate relationships, because it's not just you going one way, Nick. They need to tell you. If you're aggravated, trust me, the first thing you do is become unapproachable, and secondly, they stop telling you things, and that's when you get caught in this cycle of and then you'll start blaming them for not telling you things, and guess what? You become unapproachable, Nick. And I have, or David.
Yeah. No, I'm very blessed to have the team around me. They're amazing. They're passionate. They blurt stuff out, but it's all very honest, raw, and in the moment, which is the perfect feedback, right? It's like it's not always right, but we have that benefit of 7-8 years plus of working together. So we're all we definitely crossed the professional line many years ago, which is nice, because that kind of a dysfunctional family sort of feel, which is lovely. Well, sorry, family feel, because no functional family I've ever met. So I think that's good there. It was definitely my first taste of the ego coming in, like the whole doubling down not knowing I was wrong, and doubling down not to be wrong, to try and speed through it. And it was a good kick. It was a good sort of kick. Afterwards, phoned the person in question just to go, sorry, I was being an arse.
Right.
He was like, yeah, you were. I'm like, yeah, brilliant. Let's crack on. Thanks. Sorry. Virtual hug, and on we go. And now I feel great, actually. Now, like that moment of like actually acknowledging the fact, I've got that wrong. I'm sprinting on something we need to walk through. Feels a lot better. So, well, that's me decompressing my little bump in the road this week, which was good fun. And hopefully we can get it resolved and go from there. Anything else that's been on your radars you thought fairly interesting, you think it's worth sharing with the community at home?
The one last thing that I've seen is that you have to work 10 times harder at relationship. Now a lot more things is virtual, because meetings and conversations tend to be so much more functional because it's on Zoom, and we miss out on those 5 minutes walking to a meeting with somebody, grabbing a coffee, even just having lunch. And, those are the moments that we miss with people that we're working around. And so you have to work, I think, at least 10 times harder to keep that human connection going. Otherwise work becomes, it is increasingly sort of functional. And there have been a couple of challenges that I've seen in the last few weeks where they wouldn't have got to that point had people been physically in the same place. A lot of it would have been de-escalated because a lot of it's over Messenger or Slack or WhatsApp. And that is, that's good for information. It is horrific for communication. And so I think one of the top tips for leaders is it's very, very hard to over communicate with people and over connect with them in this moment.
Yeah. And I think, it looks like if you're a European UK view of this, it looks like Christmas is cancelled, right, from a company point of view. And I think businesses should really start thinking about that. That was for most businesses, a wonderful getting together moment of, sharing the reviews of the year, celebrating, maybe working out a few issues, right, and a refresh. And potentially now it's a bag of crisps and a Zoom call, right? Which is hard. And I think people thinking about how do you actually make that more of a connective experience is a tough one, and one we need to start thinking about now, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just going to feel like a very transactional world we're in, which it can be a little bit at the moment, which is fine. But like we creep in the office, correctly and by all the rules, and it is so nice feeling connected and sharing stories. Probably not as productive as when we were working at home the day before because we're wanting to talk to each other a bit, but it actually feels like you're working for someone, you're doing it for a cause rather than just sort of a paycheck, which is a nice feeling.
There's one last thing I think I'd add, Nick, which is around searching out people that disagree with you, and that's within your team, and really valuing that, because that's someone who really cares, and you can really, just by acknowledging people for what they think and who they are, it makes such a massive difference. So even though Christmas presents may not be forthcoming, quite frankly, that's a load of materialistic nonsense. In large part, what really matters is acknowledging each other for who we are. So just stepping out, encouraging, because this is actually, that disagreement, what steer the ship. It's not you, Nick. What good looks like, it's that disagreement, it's that steering, and you are and the challenge is to sort of maintain a blank sheet of paper and really understand if you disagree with someone, really take an interest and say, okay, that's great, tell me more. I want to understand where you're coming from, because it's very easy if we're getting stressed or things are getting difficult, just to sort of label and put in a box. And it's such a wonderful thing. It costs nothing just to acknowledge someone for who they are and take an interest in people.
Yeah. We say the magic's in the middle, right? When we actually bring two different viewpoints, strong viewpoints, and see if there's a compromise, but also not just compromising for the sake of a compromise, right? I think that's something we're very aware of is very dangerous, like appeasing people to getting like what is actually the best outcome here.
Yeah, I think what the key with that is to get to the specifics, and you can have a specific conversation and watch the generalizations, because that's where conflict takes place. But when you get down to the specifics, like Brexit or non-Brexit, you find there's only one thing that you need to sort out. And you might disagree, but someone's got to make a decision. That's okay. But as long as you acknowledge people that for who they are and respect what they're saying and the process is fair, you get away with it, Nick. I've got away with it for years. I've shut whole factories with no process whatsoever by being fair to people and treating them well. So I think it's that's really the key.
Yeah. Well, somewhere in that conversation is a title for this show, which I don't know. But I think if we leave on the note of fairness, I think we can all agree that is one of our key weapons in what we're all trying to do. But guys, thank you again today for like a slightly different format. We'll be back with the full crew next week, going over. I think we're going to talk on humour, which has been something for us to talk about, which hopefully is, well, don't bank on it being humorous, but we'll give it our best shot. Otherwise, thanks for all the support. We love all the comments. We love all the tricky questions, and we will see you all very soon. All the best. Bye-bye.